So we're back with lesson 4, part 2. So we've designed our model. I can also share, Attila, saved his file as the draw.io extension, so we can actually open it and continue working with it. So I can share that as well. We may need to modify a few more things in our model. So here's what we're going to do. I mean, we've already got a category model in our project. Right? We created this model back a couple weeks ago. So we have a simple category model already. We've called the primary key field category underscore ID. Last week we set some range, some validation rules, and we gave it a friendly alias. We also have a string property for name where we customize our error message and we said that it's required. So what we're going to do, and maybe we'll do this in breakout groups. I'm going to start the breakout rooms in just a minute and pause the recording. Is we want to design the other 4 tables. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to just randomly assign you to one of 4 breakout groups. If you are in breakout group 1, I want you to create the model class for cart items. So I'll put this in the chat. Okay. So group 1 is going to design the cart items model. Group 2 will design the product model. And they should be singular. Sorry. Cart item, product. Group 3 will design the order model. And group 4 will design the order item model. Okay, so I'm going to pause the recording. You're going to randomly get assigned to one of 4 groups. And in that group together, what I want you to do is write in C# is I want you to create the class in your model. And then you can share the code for your model. Probably actually through a paste bin link would be the easiest way to do it. Okay, Yulia, just make sure you're using the chat. If you're in that group, then you can use the chat in the breakout session. Okay. Yeah, so it's fine if you need to use the chat. Or you can give everybody at Starbucks, that's right, a lesson in C#. Okay, so I'm going to pause the recording, start the breakout groups. Maybe give me like a little wave when you're done. Okay, it shouldn't take more than about 5 minutes. As a group, design the model class assigned to you. Zoom the recording. Okay, so group 1 that was designing the cart item model, if you could either paste the class either into the chat or put it up on paste bin and share a link with us. So that the rest of us can use the cart item model you designed. Okay, thanks, Attila. So we don't need the namespace because we've already got that. So what I'm going to do, I'll just chat here. I'm going to open up Visual Studio. And in my models, I'm going to right click. I'm going to add a class called cart item. And it's singular. There's no S on the end. And then I'm going to take the class definition here. So basically, starting from the range, I'm going to take that, paste it in. Okay, let's see. Now we'll modify these a little bit. The definitions are a little different. So we'll look at, you guys actually did quite a good job here. So the first thing we need to do is we need to accept the reference to the like we did last week, to the system.component.data annotations model. So we could use a range. I'm actually going to set the quantity, the range, the minimum at 1. You can't add something to the cart with a quantity of less than 1. Okay, so we will come back. Now we're getting these because I don't have product and user models yet. We don't really need these here because this is just our primary key field. We're never actually even going to show this field. So it's okay to have a range and a display value, but they're probably not necessary. This is just going to be an auto-generated ID. So I'm just going to remove those from mine. Now, what we do actually need here is we still need the key field. So we're going to have a public int. We also need the product ID. And a public. For the user, I'll explain why later, but it's going to be a string. And the reason is the table we're going to use from the identity library, it actually generates like a long and kind of hashed string for the user IDs. It doesn't actually use numbers. Yeah, we'll look at that table a bit later, or in a few weeks. We don't actually need the foreign key declaration. And I'm going to take out the user one. I'll explain later. So every cart item has a parent product. So we've got both the ID for the foreign key, and then we've got this representation. So this represents the parent object. One product, too many cart items. Okay, so here's my completed model. And maybe on the price, actually, we also want a range, right? Price can't be less than 1 cent. For example. So here's the completed class. So you guys did really well. I'll put my version up inside. There's a cart item. Okay, thank you. Group 1. Group 2, could you please share your product model? And I'm going to make a new class again called product, singular. Alex, we may need it. We probably do want it as well, yes. That's actually a good point, Alex. We probably want to say required on both quantity and price. These will be automatic because they're, so yeah, good suggestion, Alex, thank you. Okay, so Scott posted the product model. So I'm going to grab the contents and dump those in. Again, we'll need to reference in all of these, again, the data annotations. Okay, so you've said minute product length can't be less than 2. That's good. Product price, I'll maybe set it 1 cent as the yeah, and we can keep all these things. The photo is not going to be required. So I'm going to take that out. The photo is optional, and I'm actually going to use, we could use double or decimal. I'll probably use a decimal. Here. Now we also want a reference to that parent property. And the reason we do this, you may be wondering, well, why do we need this, right? We've already got a category ID here. Shouldn't that be enough to represent the relationship? Not really. This will create a foreign key field in the table, but this is what Microsoft calls a navigation property. And what this will do, this will tell the database that this is actually, it sets the relationship, that there's a one-to-many relationship between the category and the product model. This on its own, it's not smart enough to realize that this comes from the category model. So here we're explicitly saying that category is a parent to product. So we'll save that. And then we want to make the order and order detailed models. So if I could ask group 3, we are going to have to come back and add a couple of other relationships here. And then I'll push all the code up to GitHub. So you've got it. Okay, thanks, Alex. So I'm going to make a new class called order. Yeah, I don't think the chat can. Okay, got it. Thanks, Alex. So we can customize the error messages. You can also leave them and just use the default error messages if you want. So we'll make our reference. I think I've got city. Oh, I've got city in here twice. Okay, so let me just space these out. Okay, we don't need to worry about strings for the total. Okay, order date. What I'm going to modify, thanks, I was going to modify this. I don't think date should be a string. I think what should we use for a data type here for the date? Yeah, thanks, Attila. We'll use a date time. Address can be a string. Our user ID is also going to be a string for the reasons, like I said, we'll look at later. Cities required. I'll put this all up on Pastebin as well. Okay, phone number, I don't recommend should be an integer. Okay, phone numbers are really strings with digit characters. So for example, we could enter a phone number like, 855 ask Rich, right? So I would actually recommend that we should be using strings. So I'll just make this required. Okay, payment code. I'm going to take that out for now, the required attribute, because we want to be able to save orders first before we do payments. And then I'm also just going to move first name and last name. Probably makes sense to move them up in the list, even before the address. I'll put this up on Pastebin in a minute. Okay. So there's our model. I'll put the whole thing up on Pastebin. I'll put the link in the chat. Sometimes Pastebin works better than using the chat. So there's our order class. And then group 4, if you could share, and maybe using Pastebin would be easier than using the chat. If someone could share the order item. What does your order item class look like? Thanks, Pauhua. So you've got the link right here in the chat. So I'll go back to Pastebin here, or paste of code, that works too. All right, so here's our order items. Okay, I'm gonna make a couple small changes. Notice we've got an S here. So again, our class name should always be singular. So I'm just gonna copy the content inside, but order item should be singular, which means I'm also gonna change that name of that primary key field. Okay, so we've got an integer for quantity, a double for price, 2 foreign keys. So we'll maybe set out here, again, a range that quantity cannot be less than 1. It's going to be required. Price also should not be less than 1 cent. Again, we'll add our reference to system.component.data annotations. And now we'll also add, we have our 2 foreign keys. We'll add our 2 parent references. Right, so every order item has a product parent. It also has an order parent. We cannot have an order item without a product and without an order. Both of these are required. So here's our order item class. I'll put the revised version up on Pastebin. I'll put the link in the chat. Sure, we're not quite done with product yet. So we're going to do one more thing here with product. So we've modeled, if we go and look at our order item has 2 parents, right? If we look at our ERD, it's got a product parent and an order parent. As we could see from our diagram, every order item gets both a product and an order. Every product has a category. So we've added in our model, we've added the parent side of the references, right? Like product has a category parent, order item has a product and order. But we also now need to model in the parent classes, we need to model the children. So let's start, close everything up here other than our models. So we'll start with our category, right? So category has no parent class, but it does have a child class. So every category has a child reference of type product. Right? One category can have many products. So we're going to add this child reference. So now the reference is made in both models, right? The parent class of category has this child reference to a list of many products. And then in the child model, we've got the foreign key field as well as the parent reference. So we'll need to do this in the parents of the other relationships. I'm going to push all this code up to GitHub in a minute, and then I'll give you a few minutes if you need to copy and paste any of the model classes. Okay, so Alex, I'll push them all up in a moment. We'll just finish these references that we need in our other models. Okay, so we've handled here the category product relationship. We've enabled these references in each model. We've got a one-to-many relationship between product and cart items. So in cart items, we've got the parent reference, but products needs the child reference, right? So here's cart item. We've referenced the parent. But now in products, we'll need a list So the product is the child of the category. It's the parent of both cart items and the order items, right? Because the product can appear in a cart and it can appear in the order items. So it has two child references. So now there's the complete product model. Again, I'll just pull up my diagram, right? Products is parent to cart items. It's also parent to order items. So this model needs to contain all of these references. So our order item already has the two parent references. And now our order model also needs the child reference. So one order can have many order items. So now our projects, our models, not only does it define the tables in our database, the columns in each table, the validation rules, but it's also going to set up the table joins for us based on these parent-child references. So again, our parent class gets a reference, a list of the child object, and the child object has a reference to the singular parent object. And some models, like product, will have both. It's got a parent reference here, and it's got child references here. So I'm going to go to Git changes and push all of this stuff. So we can see I've got 5 changes. I've changed all of my models, right? So we've added these 4 and we've modified category. So this will be lesson 4, part 1, model creation. So I'm going to push everything up to my global grub repo on GitHub. I'll throw the link in the chat for you. So if you missed anything or you want to take any of the model files, they're all right here. So Alex, you needed the product one. You can just click on raw. Just keep in mind, if your project name is different, you don't want the namespace. You may just want to copy the inner contents of the class. Okay, if your project name is different, your namespacing will be different. So rather than copying everything, I recommend just copy the actual contents of the class itself. Now, the bulk of your work in your assignment is really doing what we just did. It's taking your assignment idea, like let's see. Okay, so here we've got a dog grooming website, right? So you're going to have to take your description, go through the process we just went through together. Okay, what tables, what models do I need, right? I might need appointments. I might need shampoos. And then what are the tables look like and how are they related? And then you need to design the models in Visual Studio the way we've just done it. If it helps, you don't have to submit a diagram, but this may help you before you write the code in Visual Studio. It's a good idea to use an entity relationship diagram to plan it out. What tables do I have? What columns are in each table? What are the foreign keys and what are the relationships? If you do this first, it makes this process easier. Now we have to do one more step, and then we can use the Visual Studio migration tool to connect to our database. Sorry, 2 more steps. And then we can generate these tables in our database. So we're going to open up a file we haven't used before. Under Solution Explorer and Data, we have this file here called Application DB Context. So this file, this is our database connection file. So it's of type DB context, but it's a special kind of DB context. Rather than being a generic database connection, it actually inherits from identity DB context, which is the base class in the entity framework for managing user identities. So this file is automatically included. It's in the data folder. When we set up our project for authentication, Visual Studio gives us this file. So what we need to do is we're going to make global refs or all models. Yeah, in the data folder. Thanks, Manjinder. So we're going to make a public DB set. So what is a DB set? Excuse me, I have to just bring my barking dogs in the house. Stop barking, guys. You're annoying everyone. So a DB set is an entity that can be used to query and save. Oh, okay, that's good. My neighbor's probably ready to come over here and start throwing things at them. I'm dog sitting for a few days. My girlfriend's out away on business. So we can use these entities for interacting with the database. So we're going to make a DB set for each one of our 5 models. So the first one is type category that we'll call categories, plural. And again, it'll have a get and set. It's readable and writable. I'm going to do the same thing for the other 4 models. Product, and we'll make this name plural. We'll have our cart item DB set called cart items. And then we'll also do the same with order and order item. Whoops, this should just be orders. So here are our 5 public DB sets. So we can use these to perform CRUD operations in our database. Now, it doesn't recognize any of these because, again, we're in the data namespace, and all of these classes exist in the model namespace. So we just need to make a reference here. I'll just use the code hinting. We'll add a reference to our models namespace, which appears on line 1. And all those red errors go away, and we get our model classes showing up in blue. So I can put this code in to paste bin as well for you. But it's probably good to type it. It'll make sure you do it accurately. And you're going to have to do this in your assignment, right? So whatever models you have in your assignment, you'll need to declare these public DB set objects inside of the data application DB context.
Professor, I have a question.
Okay, hang on. So I just got a question here from Engender. So let's see what this says. A DB set can be used to query and save instances of this model. So queries will be translated into queries of the database. So we can use these objects to perform our create, read, update, and delete operations in the database. Okay. Yes, it is. So we define the models, and then by declaring them here, we can use those models to interact with the database, with the corresponding tables. So what this allows us to do is use kind of shortcuts for create, read, update, and delete. We don't actually have to write any SQL commands. The SQL commands are kind of baked in behind the scenes into these DB set objects. So these will have methods like find, update, remove that we can just call. So we've set up our models. We've created a DB set for each model in our database connection class. We now need to actually add our database connection into the project, right? Right now, there's still no awareness, there's no connection between the web application and the SQL Server database. So where do we do that? And these slides are on Blackboard. So we're going to go to the appsettings.json file, which is in the root of our project. So if we go to Solution Explorer and we open up appsettings.json, you'll see on line 3, so line 2, we have a connection string section, and there's already a connection string here called default connection. And it's got a value here. This is kind of like an in-memory or just a file system local database that's using Windows authentication. We don't want to use this. So there's 2 options for your database connection string. I'm going to show them both to you. They're both in this slide deck, which is on Blackboard. So for your store, for your Global Grub store, if you created your database on your local server, then here's your connection string. Server equals, and you'll just put in your computer name. Database equals, and you'll just put in Global Grub, whatever the name of the database is, and integrated space security equals true. This means you're using Windows authentication. You don't need to put in a username and password. So if you set up the Global Grub database on your local SQL server, you can use this value, you can copy it and paste it in here. Replace the section that's in red. I'm going to use my Azure database right now. My local SQL server is giving me some problems. I'm having some permissions errors. So I'm going to run my database on Azure. So again, for the Global Grub, you can just use local. For your assignment, you can't use this. The first 2 parts of the connection string are the same, server and database. But the integrated security, that's Windows authentication, that doesn't work on Azure. On Azure, we need to use this connection string, user ID equals password equals. So I'm going to copy this one. Whoops. Maybe I should do a better job copying. I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to paste it into my, well, Yulia, open up Management Studio. When you open up Management Studio, just close it and reopen it. When you open it up, it should appear right in the login window in Management Studio. Right here, it should show you your server name. Should be right here. So if you're running on your local server, that's the server name you're going to use in your connection string. So I'm going to put in the Azure credentials for the database I created last week, which was Grub. I'm going to put in my database name. I'm going to put in my for a second. Okay, so I've put in the credentials that I created last week in the Azure portal. Okay, how do you know if it's working? Well, the way to know if it's working is to click Connect here in Management Studio. That'll tell you if it's working. Dhruv, if you do not have the data folder, I suspect when you look at your page in the browser, Drew, you probably don't see register and login. Is that right? Okay, Yulia, we haven't got to that part yet. You'll see in a moment. We'll get to that in a minute. I'll show you how to check. Drew, does your site have register and login in the nav bar or no? I'm guessing it's probably not there. Okay, so the reason that you don't see register and login and you don't see the data folder is because when you created your project, you did not change the authentication from none to individual accounts. So what you will probably want to do is recreate a new project or download mine from GitHub, because it's very complicated to add in those security options after you've already created the project. So you need to make sure that you you change authentication from none to individual accounts. And you'll have to do the same thing with your assignment. Okay. So now we're going to see how does this work. So I've put in my connection. So Yulia, you probably use this version, right? You put in server equals your computer name and database equals the name of the database you created last week, which is probably Global Grub. Okay, so you'll just paste that line of code in to default connection. So now we're going to use this tool called the database migration. So a little explanation of the DB context. So what the migration does is it will take our models and it's going to automatically connect to our database and build the tables based on our model classes. So we're going to use two commands, the add-migration command and then the update database command. And Yulia, this is going to tell us if our database connection is successful. And if it is, not only is it going to connect to the database, but it's going to build the tables for us. Okay, so we're going to try this. I know we're almost at 1 o'clock, but this is not a great place to pause. So click on Tools, NuGet Package Manager, and then open the Package Manager console. This is going to open a little PowerShell window. So again, that's Tools, NuGet Package Manager, and Package Manager console. And it takes us down here, it opens a PowerShell window. So I'm going to run the command add migration. And then I put in, almost like a git commit, I put in a description. What changes are we making in the database? I'm going to call it create tables with no spaces. I'll put this in the chat as well. So it's add-migration, create tables. This stuff is not case sensitive either. So I'm going to hit enter. It's going to compile the project. And Visual Studio, it's just giving me a warning. That's okay. And notice it's opened up this file. It's time-stamped it with the current date and time, and then the name of the migration. And if we look at this, what's happening here in this file? What's going on here in this file that got generated? Okay, close, Jesse. It's written a script that will create the tables based on our model classes. It's not actually here yet. So if I connect to my database, again, I'm using my Azure database, but you can use your local one. So if I look in the list of tables, There's still nothing here yet. Yeah, Alex, I put the script in the chat. I ran the command add dash migration and then a space. Create tables. You open this through Tools, NuGet Package Manager, and Package Manager Console here. So Alex and Gerline, this is where you run this command. Okay, and the command is just up in the chat. So we've generated the script, but now we need to execute this script in our database. And Yulia, coming back to your question, when we run this, if our connection fails, we're going to get a message saying the connection fails. So now I'm going to run one more command here. It's a two-step process. The command is update-database. So this is going to use the connection string from our app settings, and then it's going to use this C#, this migration file, to try and build these tables. So run the command update-database, hit enter. So I did get a few warnings, but then it says it's done. So that tells me my database connection worked. Did the migrations actually build the tables? Well, I can go back to SQL Server, and if I refresh, I now have, notice, this is kind of interesting. We've got our 5 tables, right? We've got categories, order items, orders, right? We can see the columns. We can see the keys. We can see any constraints, indexes, right? So this is all good. We've also got all these other tables. Where did they come from? Okay, Manjinder, I will. Scott, do we need scripts for each DB? Well, we're probably only connecting to one database. Update database will run any outstanding migrations. So notice we got all these other tables that start with ASP.NET. So for example, here is the ASP.NET users table. So here are all of the columns in the table. So where did these tables come from? I will explain. If I expand the migrations folder, here is the migration we just made, right? This create table. But there's also one from when we set up our project. Dhruv, you won't have this one. Because we picked individual user accounts, Visual Studio automatically generates tables for roles, users, claims, logins. It builds all of those tables for us, but until we updated the database, that migration didn't run. So anytime we want to change the database or change our models now, like let's say we want to add some new validation here, we'll change the model, we'll create a new migration and run update database, and that will update the tables for us. Yep, that's fine, Scott. You can do that. Okay, if you're getting build failed, first of all, Alex, there may be a build error in your project. So just go to build and build solution and see if there's any error there. If so, you'll have to fix that compile error. If the site won't build, you can't run the migration. Manjinder, the entity type order type requires a primary key. Okay, so yeah, Manjinder, you probably just didn't define, you probably didn't have So this has to be explicitly called order item ID this way, or else just ID. Okay? So now we've got the tables. So this is actually the hard part of setting up the project. It's figuring out the models and the data relationships. Once we have this, building the website is a piece of cake from now on. Yes, correct, Alex. It's 2 steps, right? So, and I've listed them here. It's add a migration that builds the instruction file, and then update database connects to the database and executes those instructions in your database. Okay, and there's a link in these slides to talk. Okay, that's good to hear. There's a link in the slides that describe the migrations in greater detail. Now, you could also do the opposite. You could actually build the tables in the database first and then generate the model classes from the database. That's kind of the older version. We tend to use this model first or code first approach most of the time now. So we write our models and do our relationships in code, and then we use migrations to copy those to transfer them to the database. Okay, so there is a link here if you want to do the opposite, where you're taking an existing database and generating model classes from it. There is a way to do it. Okay, so we should be set up. It is 103, so this was kind of the hard part. Once our tables are set up, we can do the easy part and the more fun part. So let's take a 10-minute break here. When we come back, we're going to generate or scaffold controllers and views, and we basically have a working website. So we can start managing all the data in here, populating our site with products and categories. Okay, let's take a break here, and we will come back. I'm going to upload everything to GitHub again, but if you take my file, you will have to again put in your own database credential. Okay? We'll be back in 10.